Hello, everyone, and welcome to AI Talk Show. I'm Asha Saxena, founder and CEO of World Leaders in Data and AI. We call it WLDA here. WLDA is a global community where senior leaders come together and we truly talk about the real challenges. We talk about transformations, data, digital, AI. And I think we are all living in such a fast-paced world that having a community that actually shares, engages, is so very helpful. And I think this is a part, an extension of what we do at Builder is to really bring thought leaders on this channel to be able to have these conversations. What we really, my goal with this series is really to make sure that we talk about real stories, we talk about real challenges, and talk about how technology is really changing our world, our companies. And today, for this conversation, we can really kind of dig deeper about transformation. We talk about transformation in terms of technology a lot. We talk about how the data, the AI wave is changing our world, but really talking about transformation from the human-centered design. And I think this topic was so dear to me when I was researching as we are thinking about changing the technology stacks or changing the workflow or decision-making process. Or even we talk about leadership models or maybe culture. And I think some of those topics we've covered in these series, but when we talk about transformation, it's incredibly complex. You know, technology alone cannot drive this kind of transformation. It's about strategy, it's about how people and systems are coming together. And I think that's why I'm excited about our guest today, Elizabeth, who's joining us to talk about really all the work she has done in large scale transformation. And I think, Elizabeth, I'll ask you to probably go back into your journey. But before I formally introduce you, I want to kind of share with the audience about the work you've done as a global design practice director at IBM. You've worked with Sloan Kettering, which is, a remarkable organization, healthcare organization, premier center for cancer research. And you've worked with Capgemini. And now you're the chief strategy officer for a international global organization and really work with complex change throughout your career. But before we jump in, I want to welcome you, Elizabeth. Liz, I'll call you. And before we get started, tell us a little bit about your background and also about the kind of work you've done and how you've come to where you are today in your professional career.
Yeah, thank you, Asha. I reflect on my professional career as being one where I have followed my curiosity. So I have always been a storyteller. And when I first went into college, I was planning to be a journalism major until I took my first film course and then switched majors to visual media because I wanted to make things, moving pictures, digital media, which then led me into advertising and marketing roles. After working in Chicago and Los Angeles, relocated to New York, joined a design agency, became managing director of another, and then started my own. And this was right around the time that things were really evolving and progressing from a digital standpoint. So what became videos years ago became apps and other digital experiences and physical experiences as well. And over the course of that time, owning my own firm, IBM became a client. And this was around the time of the IBM Watson and Jeopardy challenge. I saw the writing on the wall immediately that where the world was going was one that was very much driven by advanced analytics and AI. Although I did go back to school to get my MBA, I didn't go back to school to study data science or computer science. But made that commitment that I wanted to shift into taking all of my skills and talent into technology firms, which I have been working within ever since and absolutely love it. And the rate and pace in which things are moving now, if we thought 11 years ago things were moving fast, it feels like things are changing and the competitive landscape shifts under our feet on a weekly basis.
Yeah, so right. First of all, I have to say I admire the fact that you went from film to storytelling. I think media is such a powerful way of telling stories and making impact. And when you think about technology, they say that technology is a tool, but if you don't know how to tell a story or create an impact with that tool, it doesn't, goes on the shelf. It becomes a science experiment. So even though, as you said, you went back to do your MBA, I think it's so critical in this transformation journey, in this design of human-centered technology, which we are talking about today, is because to really understand what the business problem is, to understand why we are implementing this technology the way we are, and is it actually going to give us the impact that we're looking for? So when we talk about in this age of transformation, uh, what role design, the human-centered design, really plays? So can we just go maybe two layers deeper into that and talk a little bit about your experience and why that is so critical?
Yeah, I see design shifting from how should this screen look to conversations around how should this system or even systems behave and how that behaves over time. So this is a shift from design being almost superficial or the superficial layer on top to design being literally how things work and what that interaction is, whether that is human to machine, system to system interaction. So with AI, of course, we're no longer designing for static interfaces. We're designing for this relationship between people and data, intelligent agents that keep on learning. So this means designers are now maybe opening up a different skill set. That could be choreographing conversations, designing or defining guardrails and feedback loops, and, and helping to define the AI steps forward. And when we need to press pause and take a look at those guardrails or ask for explainability in the case where something may be too much of a black box. So I think that the role and the skill set of the designer has certainly evolved, hopefully in a richer and more stimulating way, quite frankly.
You know, I think there is three levels of the transformation that's happening with AI. First is the organization as a whole. Like, how do organization think about designing their organization to be ready to adapt and transform with AI? The second layer is the system layer. How do we build the systems around it? And the third layer is the people layer. Is like, how do we as people engage with the system? Um, in your career, as you've gone through, how have you seen the shift from the technology organization like IBM to healthcare organization, and now you're working with an organization which actually transform digitally a whole country? And I'm going to let you speak about that, the company you're working with, and how they were the transition transformation for the country like Estonia.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So Nortel became famous in the first place for leading the digital transformation for the nation of Estonia, which is a small but mighty nation of
Yes.
1.3 million people. And it's a model and replica that people come and visit the Innovation Center. So Asha, next time you go there, you'll have to tell me so I make sure you get a nice tour of this experience to see what transpired over the past 25 plus years that have kept Estonia as this role model of literally everything you can do online. And there are a lot of principles behind this. So it's not just digitization for digitization's sake. There's principles like the once only principle that the government can only ask you for your personal information once. And then you have the permission to propagate that to whatever entities you give the permission to. Um, People who are residents of Estonia own their own data. So there is an extreme, and I think we are living in the age and the moment of an obsession with data sovereignty right now. There is an extreme protection of data and data privacy and who is entitled to have your data, and even a system that you can log in and see every day who accessed your data. But you are the one, as a citizen, as a resident, that gives and authors that permission. And
Mm.
you can do everything online from voting to getting married to most recently getting divorced. That may be something that's slightly controversial, but it is to show the ease of experience as well as there's a very great example of maybe what we've seen some retail companies try to do in the US of being able to follow a customer journey across life events. So if we know you had a birth of a child in your family, the government can send to you what you're entitled to get, and you don't have to lift a finger. You don't need to process an application. Your benefits just come to you. Same thing if you become unemployed. Same thing if somebody passes away and all of the life events, positive or negative, there's no friction, or often there's no action that a citizen even needs to take. The services just come to them. So it's very much a nation that's designed around both these privacies and protection, but a real sense of data interoperability so that things can flow seamlessly, sort of in the layer under the iceberg, that it creates just, to me, this nirvana experience of what the future could look like, if only. So this is an example that we can maybe look in small ways. If we take the United States, for example, maybe some of these principles could be applied at a state level within a corporate structure. Maybe some of the same principles can apply, and certainly the same is true in healthcare with the data interoperability that many European nations have, being quite good. And even in Estonia, as there is, I know, in Iceland as well, there's a genomic database which enables quite precision medicine to be possible. Of course, there's a lot of risks and threats that
Yeah.
go alongside with that as well. But so many possibilities, it's just endless when you have your data captured, organized, and also protected and defended in an intelligent way.
You touch upon a very important piece here, which is the data. I think when we think about any model to give you the output that you're expecting, if the data is not strong, the output won't be strong. And when you talk about countries, if it's United States or other countries globally, I think consolidating that data to be able to provide the citizens the benefit. I love your example that you can do anything in Estonia from, your driver license to your marriage to your divorce or, anything else. And it's the ease of use, but when you think about it, I want to go back to something tactical. When you think about design, and you come from, the expertise in decades of expertise in design thinking. When we came from the digital world, we were focusing on interfaces, right? We were focusing on websites, applications, dashboard. And so when we were thinking about design, it was very static. We were thinking about how do we look at this design? How do we engage people? But now we are living in this world where the systems are learning, adapting, recommending, and even sometimes they're making decisions. So we are now thinking about designing in a different way, designing interfaces to design how intelligent systems are behaving. So I want to go back to something tactical. When you're thinking the leaders who are listening and they're working for these large organizations, how should they be rethinking about the design when it's no longer building a software, it's building intelligent systems.
Absolutely, Asha. And you nailed it on the head in the beginning of conversation when you said we first need to define what is the human problem that we're trying to solve. If we're talking about a citizen, if we're talking about this in the context of a business, of course, what is the business problem we're trying to solve? So we begin with that. We're not asking a question around what can the model do. We're asking a question of, what powerful capabilities do we need to enable whilst having attention paid to explainability, error states, how much cognitive load this might be putting on the user. So these are some of the new design challenges. And if design shows up only after these model or platform decisions are made, then we get reverted back to these mostly service level cosmetic decisions and discussions that I was talking about earlier in our conversation. So when design is in the room early, design can help define use cases and success metrics risk boundaries and also what good looks like from a human perspective. That upstream involvement often changes the shape and the very foundation of the solution. Also, that will help us to define which workflows to target first. And as we were just talking about with the data, which data do we actually need? And what level of autonomy is appropriate for the system that we're building?
When you think about the organizations who are adopting AI so much faster now, like everybody's trying to jump in and build these POCs. But there is a gap between POC, which is the reality, and the desire of execution and scaling. And this gap is a real gap. And there are many studies, McKinsey, MIT studies that show that a lot of efforts in last 2 years has been stuck in POCs and have not been able to see the full scale. Where do you think, or in your experience, what has worked and what has not worked, and why are we stuck, and how do we go over that hump?
So I spoke last year to a pharmaceutical company who should remain nameless. Um, and my contact was explaining to me that the organization had over 100 AI POCs.
Oh my God.
And one of the many problems that he saw was that no one was talking to each other to share the successes, to share the failures, to identify is there any common patterns, or are we working on redundant business problems? So everything was just, left to its own design. So there needs to be some sort of, and people inherently don't like to have too much control. They often wish to have autonomy, but there needs to be some form of centralization in organizational speak, if you want to call that a COC or a COE, or something that corrals everything, if not to make sure that the learning is shared and that the rest of the organization, if somebody has an idea, if somebody has a business problem that they identify, maybe this is already being worked on in the COC, COE, Foundry, whatever it's called, that there's some central brain logic, business rhythm around everything that's happening. And then I think, something that we were selling to customers 8 to 10 years ago was the notion of a value realization office.
Yep.
So what is the value realization office for these AI initiatives? And oh, by the way, I don't think that these one-off pilots in a vacuum are set up to succeed in a lot of ways, because I think what organizations ought to be thinking about, which many of them are not, is the org design, the operating model, the spans and layers, the job descriptions. Like everything right now should be re-examined in light of, what is an individual doing autonomously? What is somebody doing with being AI augmented? And what is actually being completely automated, and how this all moves and dances together. You probably have heard as well as me, Asha, that I have spoken to banks, I've spoken to medical device companies that have all said that we have bots or agents in our HR system that, just like a human employee, they have a serial number, they have a profile in
Yeah.
our corporate database. So in a world where this is happening more, we need to look back organizationally at what's happening as well, rather than just rolling out more and more pilots. I was actually on a call with a customer this morning who was reflecting on the fact that they've had more interaction with HR because of all of the org changes and org redesign required than they had ever in their career. And I think that that's a very good thing, that we need our HR business partners to be along this journey with us. And in some ways, this maybe helps collapse some old organizational silos on the corporate side, because the companies that are thinking about things this way, and with full and inclusive, holistic views of, how we are reshaping processes, how we are reshaping workflows, we are reshaping the organization, and creating an organization that is continuously thinking and learning rather than this L&D department that's maybe off to the side, like doing nice things on occasion or giving you your Coursera license. Like, how does the organization become almost like an operating system itself?
Right.
But everybody needs to be, somewhat, bought in or tied together in making this all hum, let's say.
You know, the fact that I agree with you that I think from deploying these solutions, the critical piece is to having that open communication and making sure that you have the right priorities in place to be able to create that success. But I think the biggest challenge I've seen is also the trust issue. The Stanford Institute's human-centered AI actually produced a research that said that the trust in AI often breaks down not because of technology or the challenge in technology, but really because people cannot understand how the system reached a conclusion. So
Hmm.
the explainability, which you spoke about a little bit, is really where it breaks down. So the question really comes that is there enough trust into these systems? Uh, and so when you are working with organizations or you've worked in your experience, how do you get this human experience of AI when, you know, explainability or the question that it's not going wrong? How do you see the leaders think differently about designing these AI products and services that can actually produce the value? I love your talk about the value generated or how value realization can be created with these systems.
So, Asha, we need to design for controlled autonomy instead of full autonomy by default. And that means being explicit about roles, what AI is doing, what the human is responsible for, and shifting the dialogue that we have been having, which everyone has probably heard the term human in the loop.
Yes.
So, in many cases, rather than human in the loop, we may wish to have human in the lead. And when there is a human in the lead, maybe people are more confident and clearly then that person, that human can inspect and override and provide feedback. So simple patterns like confidence indicators and alternative suggestions and the ability to ask, why am I seeing this, can go a long way towards preserving agency and building trust over time, which will, of course, not happen overnight. And I'm sure everyone who's listening with us today has had an experience of using name your LLM and
Yes.
seeing something go like completely wrong or getting an answer that you're like, oh, this is way off. Come on, try again. So we still have some work to do, but I think if we take at least today this human in the lead position, then maybe we can build trust and also build safely.
It's really important. I think the whole organization builder was built on that mission of responsible, ethical AI, having diversity of thoughts and explainability and being doing it right. But I also feel like the whole world of AI is kind of now, if it's product services, operations, the boundaries between design engineering and the business strategy is kind of blurring. It's all kind of coming together. If someone was, people who are listening, someone was building a design organization today inside AI first company, what do you think would be your recommendation, the mindset or new capabilities they should be thinking about or prioritizing?
Yeah, so I think the mindset or the shift that I see from the past, maybe 5 to 10 years ago to now, is human-centered design used to be like this manifesto or rallying cry, and everybody was, super gung-ho about design thinking, for instance. And I think we need to look at design as more towards how we make everyday micro decisions. And I really believe in having design or designers embedded in different business functions. So could be finance, could be HR, could be name that function, or product if
Yeah.
we're looking at a more product centric organization. So this to me is where there can be a lot of strength, and there still needs to be some sort of community of practice for designers to come back to you and be with other designers and share best practices and learn from one another. But I think that there is a lot of value in having designers deployed and embedded either, in different product teams or different business functions, especially now that we are looking at, things like the AI user experience and making sure that we have the right level of safety and consent and back to what we were saying about the workflows that keep the human in the loop, especially when the stakes are high. That also means designers need to design more and more for the edge cases.
Mm,
So not just the
true.
the everyday norm or the screen or the interaction we see every day. What happens when the system misbehaves because certain data is missing, or what
Yeah.
happens when a bias is detected, or what happens when a user disagrees with the AI. So um, designing just not for the normal optimal daily experience, let's say, but also designing for the edge cases, I think now is something that we're seeing more of.
Uh, as you look forward, what is something that you're optimistic, excited about? And what is one thing that you would say be cautious? What is a challenge and opportunity?
I think what I am the most excited about is the possibility for game-changing AI, let's call it. So healthcare is a great example. I think we both have industry experience there. And my word of caution is almost the flip side of that, that people at right at this moment are so caught up in the efficiency gains, which of course, like practically and pragmatically, and if you're a business looking at your bottom line and your quarterly earnings, managing your P&L, like, yes, I understand efficiency is important. But I think just being too fixated on the efficiency is pulling us away from defining the game-changing AI for our industries or for our companies, and what new opportunities get opened up for innovation, for growth, for really using our imagination in new and unbridled ways. And I hear about people talking about this less often than I would like. So it's almost like a double-sided coin of, where are we hearing, some remarkable stories, quite frankly. I am missing those. And in days where the news could be bleak, I think more and more people would like to hear remarkably positive stories. So I think that that's thinking positively and optimistically where I think that things could go. If we can put that hat on for a moment and not only be obsessed around productivity, because I think there was also data and headlines out this week that employees are becoming more productive, but what they're doing with the freed up time is not benefiting the organization. So yeah, we're in a little bit of an interesting crossroads here.
They say that there's always a little bump that comes in your way when you're changing, when the change actually creates a little riffraps within your organization and little shift towards how you're going to change. I think as you said, thinking about how we're using AI, not just for productivity, but also for other interesting use cases, because there could be so many other interesting use cases. Just instead of, in my book, The AI Factor, I talk about optimizer where you can create efficiency, but there's also innovation. You can think about R&D and how do you really develop new technology, new product, new systems, and then extender where you can actually have a market reach or build a multiplier and break your own business rules. So there's a lot more opportunity for audience and the organizations to really use a powerful technology like AI that can actually create shifts in your organization. And I love what you said. It's yes, be productive, but use that time to make sure that you're using that time more effectively. I could go on talking about this. This is one of my favorite topic, Liz, but I think as we come to the close, I want to thank you so much for your time and your knowledge in the industry. And I think I usually talk about technology a lot, about the infrastructure, the data, or the tools and the culture change. But really, design is something which I truly believe can change the story, and what really stands out for me here in our conversation is like, yes, AI is about creating the transformation, but it's not just about technology. It's truly about how human interact with the intelligence system. I think it's about people. It's about having that discipline of creating a design to bring together the technology, the human behavior, the organizational strategy. And most importantly, I think we touched upon a little bit is the trust, really understanding. Can you explain? Can you truly understand what the response is, how the organization is giving us the response. So thank you, Liz. I don't know if there's anything I missed. Any last words before we close?
No, no, not at all. I would just encourage everyone with us today to think about how to use AI for creativity, for connection, and just in new, remarkable ways.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining, Liz. Thank you, everyone, for listening in. At World Leaders in Data and AI, WILDA, we are committed to bringing the senior leaders together because we care about how we are leaving this world in a better place, leaving and building AI as a technology thoughtfully, responsibly, and human-centered perspective. I continue looking forward to have these conversations with all of you in our next episode, the AI Talk Show. Thank you, everyone. See you next time.
Thank you.